So, this is the chart that has been living in the back of the room for the last month or so. And what I have said is that if this is kind of the picture in your brain of what U.S. history looks like, you're in a pretty good place. If you could talk about the main themes that are going on over in this side, if you could talk about how federal power, how the economy is going up and down, like that would be great. If you could throw in these proper nouns, that's good. But basically, if you could give me the gist of what's going on in the 20th century as far as themes, as far as power, you got history, whether or not you know every term. So I'm going to go over basically our 20th century main presidents, main events, main themes. So just before the 20th century, we have the Gilded Age, which is from the Civil War through about 1900 or so. Again, like, unless it's a war, nobody wakes up in 1877 is like, do, Gilded Age. That's not a thing. So we say that the Gilded Age is really starting like 1870-ish through about 1900-ish, somewhere in there. But the Gilded Age is not a great time unless you are super rich, and it's the time in which, like, basically we're trying to figure out how our society fits into this new industrial sort of situation, because we have been this agrarian society of farmers, and now all of a sudden we're like in this new industrial era. So the Gilded Age is going to give way to the Progressive Era. The Gilded Age, the name of the game was state power. It was city power. It was those like bosses of the cities. Federal is not going to have a ton of power, and I told you, forget about those presidents. Starting with McKinley and really with Roosevelt, we are going to see an increase of federal power because of the dawn of the Progressive Era. People are going to be over like all of these like problems that are going on during the Gilded Age. Sure, the economy is great. However, there's all these recessions, there's all these things. So like it seems like the economy is great. We seem to be trading, we seem to be doing very well. However, the average person feels a lot of panics, feels a lot of recessions, feels like they are not being paid very much. We looked at the documents of the working man, right? They feel like they are not really gaining anything. So we start to see different reforms being made, the antitrust legislation, we start to see banking reform, various things that the federal government is taking control. We also see different things being passed, like the Pure Food and Drug Act, which are meant to, you know, like help us out and not, you know, get us killed by, you know, the products that we are eating. So what we are seeing is like the reform of like business in this time period, the idea that yes, the federal government can weigh in on your economy. So president-wise, we have William McKinley, who faces against William James Bryant in 1896, the Cross of Gold sort of situation. This launches eventually into the Spanish-American War, which Roosevelt's going to come to prominence in. When he is killed, Roosevelt, who is his vice president, is going to become the new president, and he's going to be president of his own term in 1904. Roosevelt's going to do the same thing that has happened before and say not going to be president more than twice, and he handpicks his successor of Taft. Taft does not live up to Roosevelt's expectations, even though, like, we know he did a lot antitrust-wise. And in the election of 1912, we have that race between Taft, Roosevelt enters as a bull moose, we have Debs entering as a socialist, and then Wilson. So Wilson wins because the Republican Party is split between Taft and Roosevelt, and we have really a strong Democrat for the first time since the Civil War, because we don't care a ton about the Gilded Age presidents. And Wilson is going to be this like very idealistic progressive who's going to get the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th Amendments, the income centers of wine and women, income tax, direct election of U.S. senators, the prohibition of alcohol, and the voting of women. Also, though, World War I is going to happen this period. World War I actually starts because of this like bigger theme going on of imperialism, of U.S. involvement. So it starts with the Spanish-American War that we get involved. Then Roosevelt with his big stick diplomacy, where basically we will intervene with Latin America, we will be in the Philippines, various things like this, is going to get us involved in world affairs, which means that when World War I hits, the United States is going to be seen as a power that should be intervening in this, and eventually we will be pulled in. At the end of the war, Wilson is going to go to Versailles. He's going to basically support his 14 points where he's going to say, hey, we should maybe pass these things so there would never be war again. He's going to come back home, but isolationism has hit full front. We think that like we do not want any like involvement in foreign affairs because it led to this crazy war where everybody died and we don't really know why. So Harding is elected, who promised us a return to normalcy. We're going to get back to the way things were before Teddy Roosevelt and all of his nonsense. So this is the rise of the laissez-faire, the free market, and we see a decrease of Fed power. So the federal government's like going out of it, and we're going to see the rise of business, the rise of these other things. So Harding, Coolidge, Hoover are all about like the free market, and basically letting the economy do what it will, which is what's giving us the roaring 20s because the industry's going great. Everybody feels like it's party time forever. However, not party time forever. Great Depression hits, stock market crash, Black Tuesday. The economy is terrible. We have Hoovervilles, the bonus army. Hoover doesn't feel like he can do anything because he absolutely believes in the free market. And so he thinks that his federal power is low and that he is not allowed to like mess with it. So he's going to just basically say, even up until the election of 1932, things will get better, the free market will work itself out, I can't do anything. The American people are going to be like, nah, that's not okay. And because we're in the middle of this Great Depression, and they're going to elect Franklin Delano Roosevelt, again, cousin Franklin, who is going to propose his New Deal for the American people. His New Deal reform is going to hugely increase federal power. Federal power is going to hugely expand, and this will be the start of like the Fed having massive programs like Social Security, which we can argue good, bad, but happens. We want to be isolationist again still because we do not want to be involved in any of the nonsense that's going on in the world. We're seeing like chaos going on in Europe, and this seems terrible. However, when we are attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor, we enter the war. And we can argue all day long, were we involved, were we not involved, because like we had the Fighting Tigers going on over in China. We had the Lend-Lease where we were basically giving money, giving supplies to the Allies. But we get involved in World War II, which effectively ends our isolationism. This also is what pulls us out of the Great Depression. So our economy improves in this time period because we are mobilizing for war, we are spending everything on our war. Roosevelt serves 3 terms, is elected for a 4th term. He dies in 1945 before the end of the war, and Truman drops the atomic bomb to end the war. This is part of that Manhattan Project, and this is what definitely is going to kickstart the Cold War because we now have this massive weapon that no one else has. We're seeing a need for like global sort of communication. No one wants this like World War sort of thing to happen again. So we get the UN, we get global trade agreements, things like that going on to keep us out of these things. However, tensions between us and the Soviet Union are picking up. The Truman Doctrine, where we're giving aid to Greece and Turkey, various things like this where we're getting involved in these sort of Cold War political battles are going to pull us out of isolationism and keep us going into global affairs because we basically equate communism with something bad, something that cannot be allowed to live. Therefore, we're going to be involved in a lot of places to stop it. Back on the home front, though, this is to many people the era of prosperity. The GI Bill and other things really have our economy in a great place. And so there's tons of production, things are going well. When Eisenhower takes over the presidency, he keeps the funding going with the highways, with the mutually assured destruction. We're producing all kinds of bombs and all kinds of things like this. So the economy is doing very well on the back of this Cold War and with all of this like moving to the suburbs and various things that are sponsored by the GI Bill. Cold War-wise, we are also very scared of Sputnik. If the Soviets can put something above us, they could obviously militarize that. Therefore, we're going to kickstart the space race, which will again improve the economy and like add more money into our system. With all of this, the federal government is growing. With the civil rights movement, the federal government is growing. Eisenhower enforces the Brown versus Board decision in Little Rock when he sends federal troops down, showing that state governments can't say that they will not abide by federal legal decisions, and they must integrate schools. We also get involved in the Korean War, which is one of those containment wars from 1950 to 1953. This is in order to stop the spread of communism, which again we're going to get involved in Vietnam. So the 1950s to the 1970s are really containment abroad, prosperity, and civil rights at home. Civil rights is really going to kickstart during the Eisenhower administration, but it's going to continue through the Nixon administration. So we're going to see, starting with the Montgomery bus boycott, Martin Luther King, but it's going to expand through this time period. The Vietnam War is becoming increasingly unpopular, and this is what's definitely going to make the civil rights movement and other movements more militant. Kennedy is as much of a Cold Warrior as anyone else. He is definitely trying to figure out what's going on in Cuba. There's the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then there's where he invades Cuba in the Bay of Pigs. This is also the period of the space race, but also trying to spread democracy, trying to spread prosperity through the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, Alliance for Progress, things like this. This is also the beginning of our celebrity presidency, where we're now going to be kind of obsessed with the president, what he does, his goings-on, things of this nature. After Kennedy's assassination, Johnson is going to take over. Again, the federal government is expanding through the Great Society, through various things like this. The war on poverty, Medicare, Medicaid, sort of keeping with this democratic ideal that, and democratic, small d Democrat, Democratic Party, Roosevelt, the idea that we need to have federal help in this. However, the Vietnam War is super unpopular, and our cities are a mess, everything is a mess, and the idea is that we need to kind of stop this and turn away from all of this, change is happening. So Nixon is elected. He promises Vietnamization, so he pulls out of Vietnam, turns it over to the South Vietnamese. The Vietnam War is going to continue to fight until 1975. However, the U.S. is out by that time, and so we say peace with honor. We're going to see also this idea that we need to protect our environment. So there's some growth of the federal government, but there's really this de-escalation of the military-industrial complex through detente, and this idea that we need to back off of these crazy Cold War policies. We're also going to see after Vietnam, taking away power from the federal government, especially from the executive. So we're going to see the Gulf of Tonkin, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution gave Johnson the power to conduct a war. The War Powers Act of 1973 is going to take away the president's power to conduct these wars. So we're seeing power being taken away from the Fed. A lot of this has to do with Watergate and our distrust of the federal government and the president after this scandal. And this is really seen in poor Ford's presidency, where he's sort of blamed for pardoning Nixon and is sort of seen as this corrupt bargaining type of guy. In 1976, we elect Carter, who's another idealist. However, even though he wants to make lots of changes, like the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977 and various things, he wants to make peace in the Middle East, it's really going to be the economy that's going down, the stagflation that's happening, that's going to prevent him from being able to do too terribly much. After Camp David, there's the hostage crisis, the oil embargo, all of these things that are making us feel like we are losing our power, and that we need to concentrate more on ourselves. This really does start our focus on the Middle East and our focus on global terror. And this idea that instead of fighting countries, we're now fighting groups of people that are taking hostages, things of this nature. So Carter serves one term. Reagan is then elected. He kickstarts that Cold War, which does improve the economy a bit. His Peace Through Strength program, the STAAR Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative, all of this are basically helping to kickstart the economy and restart the Cold War. He does his speech at the Berlin Wall, tear down that wall. And this does kickstart the Cold War some more. This is all part of that rise of conservatism, which is a backlash to all that protest in the 1960s, and is really showing that people maybe are more for these values that were seen as traditional. There's some political scandals with the Reagan presidency, like Iran-Contra, and the economics are hard to get under control. They're trying to switch from this Keynesian policy where the federal government is spending all the money and being the main employer to the trickle-down or supplied-slide economics, where instead it's now the suppliers, the business owners, that are being given all the power and all the money, and they are supposed to lower prices and hire more people because they're being given tax breaks. However, this is not working in the way that it might have, and the economy is still not doing too terribly hot. After Reagan is George Bush the Elder, in 1988. In 1989, we see the fall of the Berlin Wall. 1991, we see the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so the Cold War is over. And so there is now a focus on other areas that need to be addressed, such as the Persian Gulf. When Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, NATO and the United States launch into the Persian Gulf War. This is a strong victory and basically makes us feel pretty great. However, Bush only serves one term, and when Clinton is elected, we see a boom in the economy. This is mostly due to the new technology age, the internet age that's being invented in this time period. People need to buy all these new things. And we see, again, this, global trade. So NAFTA, various things that are allowing us to trade more freely with nations. We see the U.S. intervening in more places like the Balkans and various other places. And we also see another political scandal, the impeachment crisis with Clinton, which gives us, again, less trust of our federal government, particularly our president. After Clinton, we then have the election of George W. Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush. The election of 2000 is very controversial. Some people believe that perhaps Bush did not win. It goes to the Supreme Court, and he's given the presidency. And a lot of people think that, perhaps this wasn't fair, and again, decreases trust in the government. However, pretty soon into his presidency, we have 9/11, we then have Katrina, various other things, and war, and it sort of unites the country. So again, we see our focus being war abroad, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the war on terror. But at home, we're having big problems like Katrina that even to this day, New Orleans is still trying to recover from. And also the big financial crisis that happens that really brings down our economy. Our economy seemed to be going pretty well, but this boom could not last from the internet age. And so prices were too inflated. It busted. It was a lot like the issue with the stock market after the Great Depression. We also see a loss of some civil liberties through the Patriot Act, which is part of that theme that we have in U.S. history, where once we have a fear, we decide maybe we would be better being safe than we are being free. So it's like the Alien Sedition Act with John Adams. It's like the Espionage Act around the turn of the World War I. The Patriot Act also removes some civil liberties. So in the election in 2008, we have Barack Obama. We have the American Recovery Reform, healthcare reform, and we're seeing again government making a bigger role in things and definitely having a bigger say-so. Obviously, this presidency is still ongoing, so we can't really make a historical decision. But if you could sort of say these themes, that we move from Gilded Age, small government, lots of industry, lots of power for the rich, to progressive era, more government, federal power, also the imperialism leading to more federal power. The economy is doing well, to World War II, and this need for isolationism during the Roaring '20s, and then the focus is domestic. Then to the Great Depression, where again we're isolationist. Then to World War II, which really launches us to this global front, and we're going to continue to be in sort of a global idea through the rest of the 20th and 21st century. And through the different upswings and downswings. In the 50s and 60s, just remember that it's civil rights, it's protest, it's changing, it's reforming, and then you're pretty good. If you have questions, please come talk to me. And I hope that these are trends that you have in your brain and that you have learned things over this year. I will talk to you soon.